Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Sports Source here at our Junk Be Gone studios. We have a fine show for you today. Lots going on this week. So we got football, we've got basketball. Rick Barnes is tearing it down to the studs and rebuilding it. So we got a whole new roster to talk about. Highlights of the 3 new transfers who are coming in. If you haven't seen those guys, we're going to show them to you today. We've also got the NCAA hearing took place this week. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but plenty of stuff to cover. There's Lady Vols, there's baseball. We got a little bit of everything today. So let's dive right into today's show. First segment brought to you by Junk Be Gone. All kinds of spring cleaning specials going on right now. Full service stuff. You must point at, all you have to do is just point at the junk and they lift it and carry it off for you. That's their full service deal. Their team does all the work. $25 off if you just say the Sports Source when you call them. You can also do their dumpster rentals, just $299 for a 3-day rental during April. So clock's ticking, folks. Demolition, 10% off any demolition job up to $100. That could be if you've got hot tubs, swing set you need to get rid of, even single-wide, double-wide trailers, sheds, barns, garages, they can do it all. JunkBegone.biz is the place to learn more. It's a great company, and we're proud to have them as part of this show. I use them every year. Good family-owned company right here in Knoxville. JunkBegone.biz to learn more. All right. Let's welcome in the first gang of panelists for the day. Right down here, longtime radio host Jimmy Himes is with us. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Thank you, John.
From 99.1 The Sports Animal, we have Josh Ward. Josh, thank you.
Thank you.
BFL Marlon Wall's back with us today. Thank you, Marlon.
Man, I appreciate it.
And right there, from 99.1 The Sports Animal, the Sports Talk Morning Show, we have Vince Ferrara. Vince, thanks for being here.
Awesome to be here, for sure.
All right. Let's start with Tennessee's NCAA hearing, get that out of the way. It went 2 days instead of the projected 3. But one of the reasons it only went 3 is they went 10 hours a day, basically. So it was 20 hours over 2 days, long deal. At a caravan stop this week, Josh Heupel said that he kind of viewed the whole thing as a speed bump because Tennessee had cooperated. It's a speed bump for the program. I think that's exactly what a head coach should be saying in terms of, hey, we're going to be fine. Just calm down. Don't worry about it. Don't freak out the recruits. Made sense. However, the fact that SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey, and remember this the next time you want to type, SEC Sankey hates us. They're coming after us. He showed up in Cincinnati both days for this trial, this hearing. It's not a trial, but this hearing on Tennessee's behalf, which if this had been small potatoes, well, one, if it was small potatoes, they wouldn't have fought that failure to monitor charge. So it's not small potatoes. But if it had been, he wouldn't have been there for it. So I think they probably brought him in to, let's think of the absolute worst case scenario. So let's bring in the big gun to handle it. Josh, you agree with that? What do you think Sankey was doing there?
Yeah, if it was only small potatoes, they probably would have already wrapped this up, right? Because some others were able to come to a resolution in terms of the individuals involved, but Tennessee is not. So Greg Sankey being there, I think, is a positive for Tennessee for sure. And you cannot assume. Well, we've already self-imposed some penalties. Yeah. They're not going to give us a bowl ban. They won't be too harsh with this failure to monitor situation. Missouri thought, hey, we're going to be good here. And it did not play out that way for Missouri. So having Greg Sankey there, and I think his respect for what Donnie Plowman has done as the chancellor, that's been shown at the SEC level before, I think that probably helped in this regard.
I think that he was there, one, for support for Tennessee. The second thing is he was on that committee that said you don't need to punish the current coaches or student athletes, therefore you should not have postseason bans, football, basketball, whatever. So I think he might have been there to argue that point. Hey, why are we going in this direction if you're going to give them a bowl ban?
A nice reminder, yeah.
Yeah,
right
so
there.
I think that certainly had something to do with it, how much support he was giving. I think that Ole Miss and Missouri have gone before the infractions committee under Sankey's watch, but you didn't have this new legislation saying, hey, we don't need to be enforcing postseason bowl bans. So I think that if you connect the dots, I think it makes sense.
Adam Sparks, the News Sentinel, wrote that a postseason ban, which we've all pretty much said that's not going to happen. He said it was discussed in the room. To what level, I don't know. I still don't think it's going to happen. But getting back to what I said, what Josh says, I think if you're UT, you go into one of these things looking worst case scenarios. You're just prepared. That doesn't mean being negative. That's just being prepared. Anybody who runs a business knows you better look at all the things that could go wrong. So the postseason ban being brought up, does that worry you guys at all that it was even put on the table? Did you think it was dead from the beginning, or is it like I'm still not worried about it?
I would tell you it does worry me. Unless Greg Sankey's a huge Tennessee fan, I think he was there to say, hey, look, I sign off on what they're saying. Hey, let's not punish these guys. And so for me, I think that's a huge reason of cause to pause, because for him to show up, that means there's something there potentially that they don't want to have to deal with. And, hey, we need a little backup on this.
Yeah.
I think the pause or concern is because it's the NCAA and they're so inconsistent. And so I think Greg Sankey's presence is two things. One, just to make sure. And to what you said, the worst case scenario, you got to be ready for that, and you have to have a defense ready for that because this has dragged on so long. And two, I do believe, like Jimmy said, that they don't want to continue to, and Sankey certainly doesn't want to punish people that didn't have anything to do with it. So it was a safety net, and also probably some respect for how they've handled the whole process. So.
In terms of what we do expect at this point, you're not going to know. One, all the parties involved were given a gag order, basically, so no one's supposed to talk. Also, it's usually at least 6 weeks before the NCAA hands down punishments. So we're in for another couple of months of this. But at this point, we do not believe the postseason ban is a high probability.
No.
All right. Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
All right. Scholarship reductions, that's probably the number one thing you're going to face. You've already given up 12 on your own. To me, if you're talking like 10 or fewer, okay, depending on how long it's spread, but 10 or fewer, you can get through that. If you're getting over more than 10 scholarships, though, then I'm starting to be a little bit concerned. Right when you've turned this around, you're starting to recruit well again. You take more than 10 away, that worries me. What are we looking at in terms of numbers? Just guesses here. Thoughts? Any?
The thing that I had been told a while back by a source, and this changes, this is fluid, was that there was a concern that the NCAA might say 10 scholarships a year for 4 years. That's 40.
That's insane.
Now Tennessee they self-imposed 12, but the next year they self-imposed about 3. So they've done 2 self-imposed scholarship reductions.
I read something this past 2 weeks ago that had it capped at 12, that they said all told over 2 years it was 12. I was thinking it was 2 years, but I was told 12 total. Well, the thing I read was 12 total.
That's different from what I was told.
Okay.
So, but I was told 12 and then about 3 for the second
15.
year. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Tennessee felt that was, they also had recruiting restrictions. They limited some of that. So I think you're looking at scholarship reductions, limiting visits, cutting that back some, and a fine.
Yes.
And how much that fine might be, I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to get into those. I was just wondering what we were looking at scholarships, because to me, that's a taking off point.
Yeah.
If you're talking 40 scholarships, when they hammered Southern Cal, that was just 30 scholarships. You kidding me? 40 on top of what they've already done? I
40
find
would
that
be insane.
Yeah, that's extreme.
I mean, I would even
not
argue
denying
that.
what you've heard, but that would if it were 40, then that's why Sankey was there.
I would even argue, Jimmy, even if you take 10 or 12 more in 1 year or over a couple of years, you got to look at where this program is. We're in the process of building. We've got a little momentum. You've got other big dogs in the conference. Georgia that's won 2 in a row that's recruiting against you. I think even if you take 10 or 12 over the next couple of years, that's troublesome. I mean, we're in a process where the portal is jumping like crazy and people going in there every day to get people out. Man, the drop off from 1 to 2 is usually pretty huge, and that's where scholarships kick in at.
40 just seems. I mean, I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah.
It's just, my goodness, you'd be hit worse than USC was hit? That seems extreme.
Some speed bumps are higher than others.
Yeah,
John Heupel said that throughout, though. He said speed bumps throughout, so it's been a consistent message for him. So it's hard to really gauge him saying speed bumps now into what the reality of the situation.
No, but I was just throwing that out there. Agreed.
Absolutely.
I was just putting that out there just to say that your coach is trying to say it's not that big of a deal.
Right, and he should. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I still think it could be. Even if it's not a postseason ban, if you're telling me it's going to be 40 scholarships, if that's what it winds up being,
That's insane.
that's major. That's monstrous. That sets your program back. That would put me, if I'm Josh Heupel and you're taking 40 scholarships from me, that would make me think if somebody came and knocked on the door and said, hey, we got millions over here. I mean, that's how bad 40 scholarships would be. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that would be awful, and to me unexplainable if it's anywhere near that range, if it's anything comparable to USC. If it's in the say, 10 to 12 range, that is manageable. It's no good, and no coach is going to want that in the first place. The reason I say it's manageable is because now Josh Heupel and his staff have results on the field to sell, so they are recruiting at a higher level. So you would have to have a higher hit rate of prospects if you're taking away a few scholarships. You have a better chance to do that moving forward because they're recruiting at a higher level.
Now, you mentioned fine. That was the last thing I was going to get to because they are going to, you're going to have recruiting visits are going to be cut down somehow. The number of phone calls you can make will be cut down. All that will be impacted. But the fine thing, to me, if I'm UT, and I know they would squawk about, oh, it's too much money. They've got money. You've got a new contract coming television-wise. Money's nothing. If I'm Danny White and Donde Plowman, I'm praying they hit me with a $10 million fine and leave the scholarships alone, personally. Because
I don't know about $10 million.
you can cover that. You can cover $10 million. You got guys buying coaches out for $30 and $40 million at this point. So to me, take the 12 you save from Pruitt, give it to the NCAA, and keep your scholarships would be my view.
Just do $10 orange and white game next spring. start to work it back.
There you go. Now, okay, we can.
I would want to spend more money than
I was being.
Scholarships. Yeah.
I was using a little bit of hyperbole there, but the point is, I would prefer money over anything else. Mm-hmm. We can debate about what the cap is on that, but if I'm Donde Plowman and Danny White, I would much prefer a fine of $5 million. For me, $10 million. They've got it, and the SEC network's going to be writing a check for it. But I would much rather have a fine than anything else.
I would too, but I would accept 2 scholarships a year for 4 years.
Oh,
Because that doesn't hurt you much. So it just depends on how much that number actually gets downgraded to.
If it gets over 10 for me, I'm starting to squawk.
I would be shocked at that.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. When we come back, I heard somebody. Well, let me go ahead and there you go. My director's ahead of me. He's got me. I was about to skip past our overall headlines here. We got is ESPN too low on Tennessee? We'll talk about that in terms of their preseason rankings. Football portal needs for Tennessee. There's been some portal activity with the Volunteers. Rick Barnes rebuilding his roster. We got highlights of the new guys that are coming in. Clock changes. Will those impact Tennessee in football? A lot more to come in this show. But next, as I said, when we come back, could Tennessee dodge any kind of scholarship reductions by getting guys to play as walk-ons who they then fund with NIL dollars? I've seen this kicked around. We'll explain that next. Come on back on the Sports Source.